This one felt like a lot of other losses. Just rinse, repeat, same issues over and over again. We've lived this story before, but it doesn't make living it again any less bad.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Derek Johnson? This is Locked On Jayhawks, a little somber episode as KU loses to Arizona 24-20. We're going to recap the game and get into plenty about what happened, that it felt like a lot of these other losses they've suffered. Is it time for heads to roll, so to speak? We're going to get into all that on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks. And again, thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. Thank you to you for listening anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll also get into our moments, stats, awards of the game, and game balls as well. Let's start right here. This game was literally the most perfect chef's kiss KU football Lance Leipold era game. It had it all. It had everything that the games that Kansas has consistently lost, the one-score games, the close games, the I don't know, self-inflicted loss, like losses that you walk away from feeling like you were the better team. Those are the losses that I'm talking about. And those have defined these last two seasons of KU football. And it had it all. It had a one-score loss, which was it 2-7, 2-8 for KU since last year in one-score games. I mean, certainly they're, I think, 2-10 in their last 12 overall in one-score games, I believe, if I have that right. A game you, in my opinion, should have won. I thought KU was the better team today, right? And the scoreboard won't show that. And, in 5 years, people aren't going to remember, oh, KU was the better team that game. They're just going to see Arizona won the game, right? But a game you should have won. It had Lance Leipold getting on the ref far too long for a penalty that, I mean, I actually kind of thought it was a penalty, to be completely honest. But even if it wasn't, even if you don't think it should have been a penalty on what would have been a Leroy Harris pick six, right? Regardless of what you think on that, you cannot allow yourself as the, if the fans, if we want to, complain about it for 15, whatever, okay, right? But you as the head coach, you got to lead these men. And you see, I don't know why. Somebody was texting me about this during the game when Taylor Davis, there was the dropped interception, so to speak, where it got tipped in the air and Taylor Davis thought he had it. They reviewed it, got overturned, and it was an interception. And it looked pretty clear that wasn't an interception either. And I was texting with somebody about this, and we were kind of like, yeah, I mean, I guess like we were like, why does he seem so irate? Why does he seem so stunned that this would not be an interception? It looks pretty clear. I don't know, maybe the video board there wasn't as clear. But you start to think back to like the landslide just constantly getting on the to a point where it's like, you got to let the play go and move on. You got to coach your team. You can't come back out from the locker room to talk to the refs as opposed to getting your team right for the second half. That cannot happen. And you just see that and you go, okay, well, I guess that's kind of trickling down from there, right? So you had that in this game. You had it feels like this has happened in a lot of KU, one score and close losses. The dropped interception or the dropped pick six. I guess you had the dropped interception there from Davis. I think there was another one at one point in the game that could have been, tipped up in the air and caught. There was the dropped pick six, but I think it was Saeed Gibbs, which that would have been to the house and that would have clinched the game. Like, how many times has a KU DB had an opportunity to, I mean, we think of the Rich Miller one, certainly, where it's like, oh, that would have won KU the game, and they weren't able to do it. This is the big one here. Horrific game management, and it kind of boils down to this. Playing scared, not playing to win the game. And you think about all the, okay, so the big controversial one at the end, we'll get into all of them in our second segment, but there were a couple opportunities they could have gone for fourth downs. They opted not to. And, a couple opportunities where, it was like third and long and they're running the ball and stuff. The one that it boils down to at the end, Kansas has 4th and 2. Kansas has a 4th and 2, up 20-17 with, a little under 3 minutes to go at the Arizona, whatever that was, 25 yard line, where if you get a first down, it doesn't completely ice the game because they still had, some timeouts in the 2-minute timeout that they could have made a stop, but it puts you in a very favorable position that you're going to eat a majority of the clock at the very least, or you're going to eat up their timeouts, or, you're going to have a better chance to get a touchdown and then put it away if you go for that. And They end up not going for it. They kick the field goal. They don't get the field goal. Arizona goes down and scores way too easy on the other end. Now, in the post game, Lance Leipold mentioned that, and this was from Michael Swain of fog.net, that, they were planning on going for it, but the official, because Jalon Daniels got hurt in the last play, told him that he couldn't, bring Jalon back into the game. Couple things to that. One, I scoured the internet for like legit an hour trying to find the actual NCAA rule, and you can't find it because the way that search engines work nowadays, all you're going to find is the new rule that they passed in this offseason where if a player is injured or is down for an injury after the ball is snapped, then it's like the delay a game penalty thing. That's not what this was. That's to prevent teams from, they're running hurry up, I'm going to go down after the ball is snapped. That's not what this was. You can't find the actual rules. I don't actually know what the rule is. The rule you can take a timeout, because that's what he was told, that if he takes a timeout, they still can't bring Jalon in. I actually don't know if that's the rule or not. And through a bunch of searching and trying to find it, I couldn't tell you. So, to begin with, I don't really know where to start with there. Even if that is true, and again, like if that ends up not being true and that's not the rule and the refs said that, then I don't know, those refs should not like work the rest of the season legitimately. But let's say that is true and everything. I would still have gone for it. I mean, Isaiah Marshall's a good runner. Bring him in there. Run Isaiah Marshall or run Daniel Hishaw. He was having a good game because getting the first down there. I mean, they popped up on sometimes those ESPN analytics go for it on these. Sometimes it can be a little too extreme, but it was telling you to go for it if it was anything 4th and 7 or less. It was like 4th and 2, 4th and 3. And here's the other thing. Okay, but why didn't you go for it on many of the other 4th downs throughout the game? Because you had plenty of other opportunities, too, to go for it on 4th down when Jalon Daniels wasn't hurt. And then again, Jalon Daniels not being out there doesn't mean you can't go for that 4th down. You still could. You literally have a package for Cole Ballard and Isaiah Marshall where either one comes in and runs the football. So you're telling me you can't do it there on the 4th down? You're telling me they can't come in if you're going to be expecting one of those two guys to be leading your program next year and try to get you one play? You don't think that would be a legendary moment if they came in to either kickstart their career or for you having the cojones to, and that's just the end of the day. You don't have the chutzpah, you don't have the cojones, you don't have the balls to and it's frustrating too, because again, it's like if you're at Alabama, you're at Georgia, whatever, if you're bringing in all these like 5 stars, cool, good on you, be conservative, man, because you're at Kansas, act like it. And I don't say that to despair. Like, I just mean it from a standpoint of like, this is not a historically rich football program. I want to see them act like it. Be crazy. Surprise onside kick here or there. I don't know. Do crazy stuff. Do crazy stuff, man, because you need to act like you were the underdog. And you were in this game. You were a touchdown underdog coming in. And it certainly just doesn't feel like it in a lot of these games. The defense collapsing late. That's another kind of characteristic that, like, this felt like one of those early season games in 2024, whether it was the UNLV game or the West Virginia game, where it's like the defense played really well. And then the last drive of the game or the key moment was like, can they get one more stop? They can't. And then you get the ball back in an impossible situation for Jalon Daniels that it's like, you still have a sliver of hope if he can do a few things like perfectly, and it just never goes that way. So it was everything that we've seen in some of these other games. Or there's, I mentioned UNLV or Illinois last year, or the West Virginia game last year, or the Kansas State game last year, and I'm missing some, or the Cincinnati game this year, right? Again, I'm skipping past even more, and that's the problem. It keeps happening over and over, and it doesn't feel like there is any real self-reflection. It doesn't feel like there is any changes that is being happening or that is happening at this point in time. I don't know what the answer is here, right? Like I think that Travis Goff almost like, is he gonna have to like force his hand and hire a game management coach for Lance? Like, seriously, like, is it getting to that point here? And I'll say this too, like, I'm not saying this is what's gonna happen. But I have never heard the outpouring of people commenting to me, DMing me, texting me, just finding way, emailing me of that they are actually now ready to move on at the head coaching position is wild. I usually it's like you get like a couple here or there, you're upset about how the game went or whatever. It is like becoming like a legitimate like witch hunt now. from this game. This felt like the final straw for, I think, a lot of fans. And so obviously I think if you win one of these last two and get to bowl eligibility, I'm not saying all is going to be forgiven, but I think it will at least like reverse course a little bit there. But if you don't, especially looking back on this one, especially if there's another game like this in those final two, I don't know, man. I'll just say this, like, I don't know how, there's a lot of donations needed, right? The stadium is still, requiring donations, NIL, rev share, building next year's KU football roster, building the KU basketball roster, all these things. And donor support is more important than ever. And so if the donors are off the bandwagon for the coach, I don't know. That's just something to think of. But I think this is kind of this tweet kind of exemplifies in a very real way. This is from Phil Newman on Twitter, and shout out to Phil for sharing this. So I posted on X, Twitter, or whatever. This game is literally the perfect game. I chose someone to define the Leipold era at Kansas. And he quote tweeted it. He said, trying to decide if it was worse to have a team that couldn't win any games or a team that should win many games if the coach does anything possible not to win. I think that is the most common sentiment that I'm hearing from people as, the result of this game. And whether it is an overreaction in the aftermath or whether it is something that is true, it certainly seems like the data points keep stacking up over and over there. It's certainly a problem for KU, and one that doesn't feel like it's getting fixed, and it just doesn't feel like there's progress being made. Let's get to our biggest positives, negatives of the game. We'll get to our moments, stats, award, game balls, all that next. You're listening to Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by DoorDash. It is the weekend. Let's look back and crown this week's MVP on who delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. I think for Kansas, there's certainly a lot of defensive guys you could go with here. We're going to go Jalon Todd. Obviously, he had the big holding call or the PI call on that pick six, and that certainly hurt. But he had 5 tackles. He had 2 sacks. He had a pass breakup and a forced fumble. Jalon Todd was everywhere, and it felt like he was playing that kind of like Trent McDuffie role as like the slot corner who can blitz or play good coverage. So really impressed with Jalon Todd so far this season and what he did in this game. And for Kansas, Jalon Todd delivered in a big way. And just like Jalon Todd delivered, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash streaks, you save every Saturday order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, fuel your game day, only with DoorDash. Terms apply, promo period through November 18th. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can check us out on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcast. We have a recap from the KU North Carolina game. Not a fun weekend, to say the least. In fact, my last 36 hours have sucked, so KU or beyond. So, that's no fun. And this certainly tacks onto that. Okay, I'll say this, like biggest positives and negatives of the game. Let's start with the positives. I will say, like, Daniel Hishaw looked good. Again, like he continues to play well toward the end of the season for KU. At this point, I'm not picking KU in either of their final 2 games, but if it does happen, like Daniel Hishaw is a big part of it. I know just 3.7 yards per carry, but it certainly felt like he performed better than that and had some big runs kind of gashing the defense. Emmanuel Henderson got going again. That was nice to see, and nice to see him and Pickett kind of get it going at the same time. That was good for the KU passing game, even against a really good pass defense in Arizona. And then, I mean, prior to the last drive, the KU defense was awesome. And, you keep giving them the ball up 3 and not going for the kill shot. Like eventually they were gonna break through. And so I don't really necessarily fully blame the defense there. This isn't a perfect defense. We knew that. If you would have said coming in they were going to give up 24 points, I would have taken that. So, I think the defense overall played well, and you saw a lot of production. I mean, you have 5 sacks from the defense. You had 6 tackles for loss. You had 5 pass breakups. You had 2 QB hits. You had a forced fumble. Like, the defense did more than enough to win this football game. The defensive line was really good for KU. The pass rush was really good. Still some breakdowns in the secondary, but you at least, it wasn't like a consistent. It wasn't like, oh, guys are wide open like every single play like we saw in some of the other games. So this is a game that I was at least encouraged by the defense out of this one. The biggest negatives, though, it's the game management. It's the game management Let's just get into that right now. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. We're going to give out one of our awards, is the Courage the Cowardly Dog of the Game award. So these are the plays or moments that KU, again, not nearly aggressive enough. KU had a 3rd and 8 when it was down 7-0 in the early part of the game. They ran the football. You bet they didn't get it. And yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe at the end of it, like, is that a drive where if you throw and pick up the first down, what if you do end up scoring on that drive and it's a different result of the game there? Then KU's up 14-7 and trying to punch something in at the end of the half. And they run a quarterback draw on 3rd and 11. They don't get it. Laith Marjan hits a long field goal, but that allowed Arizona to get the ball back and go down before half and find their own points before the end of the first half. Obviously the kicking the field goal up 20-17 under 3, we went into that in segment 1, and that, like, all the stuff that went into that, I still would have gone for it, even if it was Marshall or Ballard personally, or even if it was a Wildcat run, or even if it was just have somebody else line up under center and do that. We've seen Jalon Daniels do the tush push for a first down. Just have somebody else do it. I don't know. So I still would have gone for it there. There's at least a little more excuse there, but there's still point being, like, you were trying to turn a 1-score lead with 3 minutes to go into still a 1-score lead. Even if you would have made the field goal, it wouldn't have protected you. Arizona still had a touchdown. So, like, and so the other one, though, and this is the one that honestly, like, is going to get less shine because of the one at the end, but I could argue it was almost just as important. Kansas had a 4th and 4 at the Arizona 40-yard line, up 20-17. And that was the play that carried over. It was the last play of the third quarter into the first play of the fourth quarter. So not only would you have a 4th down there, you had an all-quarter break to talk about it. You basically had a free timeout to discuss your play that you would want to run and run it. And instead you come out and try to just get them to jump off sides, and you take a delay of game and you punt the football. That is one right there where you were saying, hey, we're up 20-17. We're not going to give up any more points. We'll be fine. Like, we're going to play this conservatively. Again, this is Kansas football. You were 5-4. Now you're 5-5. You're an underdog by a touchdown in this game. You cannot approach this game as, we're going to hope the win comes to us. You have to go take the win. And they did not in that situation or many other situations in the game. So I think that one actually is the one I would give the award, because, again, at the very least, even though I still would have gone for it on that last one up 20-17 where you missed the field goal, at least there is that little excuse, even though, again, I still would have gone for it. That one, I don't really, the 4th and 4 at the 40 to start the fourth quarter, I don't see an excuse in that one. And that's part of the problem too, is that, like, it's almost going to be like this shield to be like, well, we didn't go for that 4th down because this, and that. Okay, but what about the other 4th downs they didn't go for in the game if you're KU? And I want to say there was another one in there too that they could have gone for, but I don't know. I might just be, like, blowing things up in my head. Anyway, let's give out our other awards. Yak King, that's going to go to Cam Pickett. There's a happy award there. Cam Pickett, so good yard after catch, man. He had 43 yards after the catch in this game, just creating those extra yards for KU. That was really impressive in this one and nearly helped KU win the game. It felt like I gave an award for had a chance and couldn't take an award to Bryson Canty. I talked a lot about Bryson Canty coming into the week, that he was one of my players to watch. I thought he was impressive last week, and I thought he can provide, like, something that this KU receiving core doesn't have as much of, that kind of, like, possession receiver who can win the jump balls. That's what last year's receiving core had a lot of. This year's receiving core has more yard after catch, but it doesn't have that guy. And Canty can provide that. And you saw that last week. And he had a couple opportunities. He had that deep ball that he couldn't hold on to on kind of like the deep post in the early part of the game. He had another opportunity to hold on to a pass on, I think it was like a 2nd and long that would have made it 3rd and short. And then it did end up with 1 catch for 2 yards, but it felt like he had an opportunity to do something bigger and capitalize off last week and get momentum. And it just didn't really feel like that one happened there. The moments and plays of the game, like, honestly, I could talk about some of the fun moments, some of the fun KU sacks that they had, some of the fun blitzes they had, some of the good pressures that, you saw from guys like Tommy Dunn or Jalen Todd or Blake Harold or Dak Brinkley was awesome, man. Like, that was one of the other big positives, that a young player like Brinkley performing, right? And there were some fun moments there. There were some fun moments on, some passing plays that you hit to, say, Pickett, for instance, or Henderson, or some nice runs by Hishaw. But in the end, to me, this game comes down to 2 moments. It's the moment at the end of the half where you thought you had a pick 6 from Leroy Harris. It gets called back for a penalty. And it's not necessarily It's just that like that was a game turning moment. If that's a pick six, you win the game. If it's not, then they end up winning the game, right? So that one probably had the biggest like change in. I mean, that was a 14-point swing, but it is the not going for it at the end there on that 4th and 2 or one of the other 4th downs. I think those are really the moments that changed the game. And then our stat of the game, or I guess stats of the game that we want to go to. This is crazy to me, by the way. Kansas had negative 47 TFL yards. Arizona only had negative 6, and KU lost the game. KU led 5-0 in sacks, and they lost the game. I would love to see, if somebody has it, like the tweet at me at D Johnson Radio or at LO_Jayhawks. If you can find what are teams' records when they have 5 sacks and the other team has 0. I would imagine it's got to be pretty darn good, and KU probably hurt that record in this game. I would say the stat of the game, it's crazy because you look at the stats and it's like KU is winning the stats. So it's like, what is the stat that KU lost in this game? You know, like that becomes kind of the problem. I mean, they were 6 of 17 on 3rd down. Again, Arizona wasn't much better. They were 5 of 13. That's another thing too. Kansas was 2 of 2 on 4th down in this game. So it's like you were doing well on 4th down when you actually did decide to go for it there. I guess you could say Kansas was 1 of 2 in the red zone with that last drive encompassing, but that feels like it's just going back to the same thing. Honestly, I don't have a stat of the game here. I really don't, because Kansas had more yards. They had like 40 more yards in this game. They had 40 more passing yards. They had 5 more rushing yards. I guess they had 23 more penalty yards. Maybe that's the stat. They had 1 more first down. Neither team was great on 3rd down. Kansas was actually better on 4th down. So, I mean, across the board, like statistically, Kansas should have won this game. So I don't know. I guess that's your stat. The Kansas should have won the game and they didn't. Okay, we're going to take a quick break in the action, brought to you by Alien Spray, the commercial that's going to be on during every broadcast of ESPN. Not actually, but we'll be back to give out game balls. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. We are brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your new crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Their Trademaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support make the entire process just smoother. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service with Supply House. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. Again, you can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts. Check out our Locked on postcast from the Carolina game as well if you want to suffer even more. Okay, our game balls in this one. Let's start with the KU offense. It wasn't a great game for the KU offense, right? You have under 400 yards of offense, but again, like the entire team did enough if you would have been able to do a couple more things to win this game. I think it's between probably Henderson, Pickett, and Hishaw. I do think Daniels had some good moments. He also ran for 67 yards or 74 yards and a touchdown. It definitely feels like to me that Jalon has problems against teams who run 3-3-5s or like 3 down fronts where they have extra DBs. Think about it. So the teams who played it this year, right? Oklahoma State kind of plays that way, but just Oklahoma State's not very good. And I guess Jalon only had like 120 passing yards, so I thought he was good in that game. But neither here nor there. The Kansas State game was not a good game for Jalon, and they play, with those extra DBs. They play like 3 down front in kind of a lot of ways. Think about it. I don't know. This is one that always comes in my mind. Go back to the 2022 game against Iowa State. Kansas wins because Iowa State misses a bazillion field goals. I want to say Jalon had under 100 passing yards in that game. That's a team who plays like 3-3-5. So I don't know. That's just a couple examples that I'm thinking of. I guess Cincinnati runs it that way, and that was one of his best games. So maybe that would be a point to the counter. But I don't know. It feels like in a lot of ways, like it wasn't a bad game from Jalon. I don't think it was a good game either. It was just a fine game. Missed some throws, some whatever. It was just a whatever game. But yeah, I guess point being for who we're going to give. We'll give it to Emmanuel Henderson. 5 catches, 65 yards, and a touchdown. This is one of his bigger games in some of the recent weeks. So Henderson will get our offensive game ball. And then our second offensive game ball, we will give it to, let's give it to the offensive line. Because again, the offensive line didn't give up any sacks in this game, and Arizona ended up only getting -6 total yards in tackles for loss in the game. So there wasn't a ton going backwards for KU. KU ran for 170 yards on 4.3 yards per carry, and they were able to just kind of have a successful churn it forward rushing game for the most part. So I'll give KU offensive line the other one there. Felt like Jalon stayed pretty clean throughout the game additionally, not just no sacks, but it didn't feel like he was taking like a ton of hits necessarily either. Okay, our defensive game balls for KU, we're going to give one to, see, this is tough because now I'm thinking and I'm just like, I want to give like 3 game balls out specifically. So there were some really good flash plays by Tommy Dunn. I'm going to give him one. He had 4 tackles. He had 1 sack, and I'll be interested to see what the numbers say afterwards, but I could have sworn he had at least a second or third pressure in there. He was really impressive. And then felt like Leroy Harris was in a lot of plays. Trey Lathan was in a ton of plays for KU. Jalen Todd obviously had those 2 sacks. He was big for KU. I am going to give it, though, to the other one, to Dak Brinkley. Dak Brinkley had his first career sack and immediately had another sack. He wound up with 2 tackles, 1.5 sacks, and as we continue to, like at this point, like, I don't know, kind of a lost season again for KU, look at the guys who are going to be, at least you hope, right, back for next year's team, can be back with eligibility. And you look at guys like Blake Harreld and Marcus Calvin and Dak Brinkley, who could be, good pieces as upperclassmen of this defense. So the more that they perform now, gives you more confidence in what they can be coming in next year. And I thought that was a really important performance, but a really strong performance from Brinkley as a redshirt freshman, getting his first sack and then backing it up right away and having a big game for KU on the edge. And in a game where we kind of talked about coming in the week leading in, that felt like the KU sacks weren't showing up as much over recent weeks. Well, he ended up with 5 in this game. That should have been enough to win the game. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Feel free to vent more about what's going on. I've got a bunch of DMs, comments, texts from people. Feel free to reach out at LO_Jayhawks with your thoughts on where things are at as well. And we'll see you next time for another edition of LOJ.